There's something you've always observed, but rarely dared to name. You've seen it in your friends, in your sister, perhaps even in yourself, that inexplicable attraction to what threatens to destroy us. You've felt it as an underground current that defies all logic, all survival instinct. Why? Why does that man everyone points to as dangerous provoke that gleam in so many women's eyes? This isn't a superficial magazine question. It's an abyss that Freud dared to explore long before it was politically correct to do so. And what he found was disturbing. We don't seek what's good for us, but what resonates with our deepest wounds. Freud saw it with crystal clarity. The unconscious doesn't seek happiness. It seeks repetition, even of what destroys us. The father of psychoanalysis discovered that what we call love is often nothing more than the manifestation of an unconscious pattern, a compulsion to repeat that pushes us toward what we know, even if it harms us. And here's the uncomfortable truth: women who grew up with emotionally absent, unpredictable, or dangerous fathers carry that imprint like an invisible map guiding them towards similar men. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because the familiar, however painful, will always be less terrifying than the unknown. It's the paradox Freud discovered in his patients. We prefer a known pain to an uncertain possibility. And that dangerous man, with his sudden silences, unpredictability, and emotional distance, is nothing more than the reflection of the first man who marked their existence. What we confuse with chemistry or passion is often nothing more than the unconscious recognition of a familiar pattern. The nervousness, the anxiety to please, the emotional roller coaster that this dangerous man produces resembles too closely what you felt as a child when trying to capture the attention of a distant father. Freud explained it with surgical precision. You're not in love with the man himself, but with the possibility of rewriting your story, of finally achieving the love that was denied you in childhood. It's a fantasy of redemption that beats beneath every toxic relationship, beneath every inexplicable attraction to someone everyone warns will hurt you. This transference, as Freud called it, isn't exclusive to women, but in them it takes on particular nuances due to the patriarchal social structure that has shaped the father-daughter relationship for centuries. The first bond with the masculine, embodied in the paternal figure, becomes the unconscious mold for all future relationships. And if that first bond was tinged with ambivalence, with a father who alternated between overprotection and emotional abandonment, then the dangerous man becomes a magnetic figure, not because of his dangerousness per se, but because he represents the opportunity to finally master what once mastered you, to transform fear into desire, wound into fascination. The most unsettling aspect of this mechanism is that it operates completely outside your consciousness. You can be an intelligent, independent woman, even feminist, and still find yourself inexplicably attracted to men who repeat toxic patterns. Freud warned us that reason has little power over these underground forces. That's why you find yourself justifying behaviors you wouldn't tolerate in other circumstances, why you feel that mixture of excitement and unease when he appears, why you confuse anxiety with love. It's not love. It's your unconscious trying to resolve an ancient conflict through a new person. And as long as you don't recognize it, the cycle will repeat with mathematical precision. But there's something even darker that Freud barely dared to outline and that his disciples developed later: the death drive. That unconscious tendency towards self-destruction, toward what disintegrates us. The dangerous man doesn't only represent the opportunity to rewrite your story with your father, but also the seduction of the abyss, the attraction of chaos. The forbidden has always exercised a special fascination over the human psyche, and a man who embodies danger activates the same neurological circuits as a drug. He promises ecstasy in exchange for destruction. He offers to make you feel intensely alive while slowly killing you. It's Freudian thanatos in its most seductive expression. The paradox is that this attraction to the dangerous isn't a sign of weakness. but of a desperate attempt by your psyche to heal. Like a vaccine that contains the virus itself to generate antibodies, your unconscious pushes you toward what hurt you to try, this time, to master it. The problem is that without consciousness, without the light of reason illuminating these dark processes, the cure becomes the disease itself. That's why so many women go from one dangerous man to another in an endless cycle that Freud called repetition compulsion. It's not masochism, it's a failed attempt at self-transcendence, an unconscious strategy to overcome trauma through its controlled reproduction. Statistics confirm it. Women who grew up in homes with violence or abandonment have a significantly higher probability of establishing relationships with violent or absent men. Not because they consciously seek it, but because their internal mate selection mechanisms are calibrated to recognize and be attracted to what feels familiar. Freud explained it as a paradox of desire. We seek in the other not what suits us, but what confirms our internal image of the world and ourselves. If you grew up feeling you didn't deserve constant love or that love must be earned through suffering, then a stable and trustworthy man will seem boring or, worse yet, suspicious. Your unconscious distrusts what it has never experienced. This mechanism is so powerful it can override your conscious perception of reality. You can see all the warning signs in a man, hear all the alarms, and still feel irresistibly attracted to him. This is what Freud called unconscious blindness. Your mind selectively blocks information that contradicts your internal narrative. Thus, controlling behavior is reinterpreted as concern, jealousy as passion, emotional instability as intensity. Your brain, in an attempt to maintain coherence with your unconscious patterns, rewrites reality to fit what you expect, what you know, what paradoxically makes you feel safe in your insecurity. Perhaps now you understand why that man everyone calls toxic or dangerous shines with a special light for you. It's not his dangerousness that attracts you, but what it represents on your unconscious map. The chemistry you feel, that intoxicating mixture of excitement and fear, isn't love or true passion. It's your body remembering, your nervous system recognizing a familiar pattern. It's the activation of old wounds disguised as desire. Freud was relentless in pointing this out. Attraction to what harms us is a symptom, not a choice. And like every symptom, it reveals more than it conceals. But here comes what Freud knew, and many of his interpreters forget: consciousness can interrupt this cycle. Psychoanalysis was born precisely as a method to illuminate these dark zones of the psyche, to bring to consciousness what operates in the shadows. You're not condemned to eternally repeat the same pattern. The first step is recognizing that your attraction to dangerous men isn't a personal preference, but a symptom of something deeper. The second step is even more difficult: being willing to feel uncomfortable with the new, with a type of man who doesn't activate your old wounds, with a form of relationship that will initially seem insipid because it doesn't produce the emotional roller coaster you're accustomed to. The true Freudian revolution wasn't discovering these mechanisms, but showing us we can free ourselves from them, that the past doesn't have to be an inevitable prologue, that compulsive repetition can give way to conscious creation. But for that, you need more than good intentions. You need to cross the desert of your own self-knowledge, to see with implacable honesty how you've been complicit in your own suffering, how you've confused drama with love, anxiety with passion. And above all, you need to be willing to unlearn what you thought you knew about love and dare to experience what you've never lived. The problem isn't dangerous men. The problem is that your internal radar is calibrated to confuse danger with love. And as long as you don't recalibrate that system, you'll remain trapped in the same macabre dance, changing partners but repeating the same story. Freud warned the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. The question is, how many more times do you need to burn yourself with the same fire to understand that what you feel isn't the warmth of love, but the burn of old wounds that refuse to heal? It's a difficult truth to digest, but necessary what you call your type of man is nothing more than the reflection of your own unresolved emotional knots. The simplistic biological explanation that women seek alpha and protection is just the superficial cover of something much more complex. Freud saw it clearly: if you're attracted to emotionally inaccessible men, it's not because they're more masculine or stronger, but because they reproduce the dynamic you've known since childhood. Emotional inaccessibility feels familiar to you, while emotional availability generates anxiety because you don't know how to respond to it. It's like a foreign language. Even if it's beautiful, if you don't speak it, you feel lost. The worst part of this pattern is that it feeds back on itself. The more experiences you accumulate with dangerous men, the more it reinforces your unconscious belief that this is what love is, that this anxiety and uncertainty are normal, even necessary. The cycle perpetuates because each new toxic relationship does nothing but confirm what you already knew: that you can't expect stability, that love is suffering, that men are unpredictable creatures you must conquer again and again. Freud called this the compulsion of destiny, the unconscious tendency to recreate scenarios that confirm our deepest beliefs, however painful they may be. We might think that in the era of information, feminism, accessible psychology, these dynamics would be less frequent. But Freud warned us that intellectual knowledge is insufficient to transform deep emotional patterns. You can read 1,000 books about toxic relationships and continue choosing the same type of man, because the part of you that chooses isn't in your rational neocortex, but in older and more powerful brain structures that respond to stimuli you don't even consciously register. A gesture, a tone of voice, a way of looking at you can activate your entire anxious attachment system and make you confuse anguish with chemistry. The trap is subtle and powerful. Dangerous men are usually experts at alternating moments of intense connection with periods of coldness or absence. This intermittent reinforcement pattern is exactly the same as what makes slot machines addictive. The uncertainty about when the reward will come keeps the player, or in this case, the woman, hooked, always hoping that next time will be different, that this time she'll achieve the prize of full connection. Freud understood that in these dynamics operates the same logic as in addictions. You don't seek pleasure, but to relieve the anguish that abstinence produces. It's not the man himself who attracts you, but the promise of finally resolving the tension that his absence and unpredictability generate in you. And therein lies perhaps the greatest irony of all. You believe you're attracted to dangerous men because they represent freedom, unbounded passion, life on the edge. But Freud would say exactly the opposite. You're attracted to them because they represent the safest prison of all, that of known patterns. Always choosing the same type of man, even if he harms you, is actually the most conservative option, the one that doesn't require you to grow or face the unknown. What would be truly risky, truly dangerous for your psyche, would be daring to relate to someone who doesn't reproduce your old wounds, someone with whom you'd have to build a new emotional language from scratch. This is the crossroads Freud presents us. You can continue in the familiar spiral of attraction to the destructive, justifying it with simplistic biological theories or toxic romanticisms. Or you can do the harder work, the true adult work, dismantling your own patterns, questioning what you've always called love, and venturing into the truly dangerous territory of emotional authenticity. The first will keep you in an endless cycle of drama and suffering that you'll confuse with intensity. The second will offer you the possibility of experiencing something you may have never known: a relationship where love isn't a constant wound but a space for growth. The question Freud would leave you isn't why you're attracted to dangerous men. The real question is, are you willing to risk the unknown to what could truly transform you? Are you willing to abandon the false security of toxic patterns for the true adventure of building something new? Because in that disposition to uncertainty, in that leap beyond your own defenses, is where Freud would say true freedom begins. Not in compulsive repetition disguised as passion, but in the courage to interrupt the cycle and finally write a new story. What makes this pattern so difficult to break is that it operates under perfect circular logic. If a man treats you well from the beginning, your unconscious interprets it as a sign that something must be wrong with him. If he's consistent, you find him boring. If he's emotionally available, you perceive him as too easy or desperate. Your emotional value system is inverted. The healthy seems suspicious to you. The harmful seems exciting. Freud explained it as a distortion of the pleasure principle. You've learned to find satisfaction in dissatisfaction itself, to feel comfortable in discomfort. And the most perverse thing, you've built an entire personal philosophy to justify this preference, confusing emotional masochism with depth or intensity. Even when you consciously decide to distance yourself from these dangerous men, your unconscious finds subtle ways to sabotage your intentions. Freud observed this phenomenon in his patients. They established relationships with people apparently different from their usual patterns, only to gradually transform them into versions of the same thing. You provoke situations that confirm your worst fears, interpret innocent gestures as signs of rejection, or simply lose interest when the relationship doesn't reproduce the pursuit-evasion dynamic you're accustomed to. It's as if a part of you needed to constantly validate the belief that you don't deserve peaceful love, that emotional stability is an illusion, that all men are potentially dangerous or disappointing. What Freud understood, and what remains revolutionary today, is that this attraction to the dangerous is also a form of illusory control. If you consciously choose suffering, if you anticipate it by seeking precisely the one you know will harm you, you create the fantasy that you have power over your pain. Chosen suffering is preferable to the vulnerability of the unpredictable. At least with the dangerous man, you know what you're dealing with. His pattern of behavior, though toxic, is familiar. With an emotionally mature and available man, on the other hand, you'd have to face your own incapacities, your fear of real intimacy, the terrifying possibility of being truly loved and not knowing what to do with that love. This is perhaps the deepest paradox Freud left us on this subject. It's not that women prefer dangerous men because they're more exciting or more masculine. They prefer them because, on an existential level, the real danger isn't drama or toxicity, but the possibility of authentic love that would demand a vulnerability they're not prepared for. The dangerous man, with all his unpredictability and emotional distance, is actually a safe figure because he allows you to keep your defenses intact, justify distrust, and above all, preserve the familiar though painful image you have of yourself and love. What would be truly dangerous, what would threaten your entire psychic edifice, would be daring to experience something completely different. Freud showed us that we are creatures of habit even in our suffering, that we prefer a known hell to a heaven to be discovered. That psychic inertia is so powerful that, even conscious of the harm, we continue gravitating toward what we know. The freedom he offered us wasn't to magically eliminate these patterns, but to see them clearly, stripped of romantic or biologistic justifications. Only in that honest recognition, in that ability to name our own interior prisons, lies the possibility of transcending them. There are no shortcuts, no magic formulas, only the conscious and constant work of unlearning what we thought we knew about love and daring to experience the unknown, however uncomfortable it may feel at first. The last and perhaps most provocative Freudian reflection on this subject is that true emotional maturity doesn't consist in stopping being attracted to the dangerous, but in understanding that what is truly dangerous isn't what you thought. It's not the intense and unpredictable man, but your own disposition to confuse drama with love. It's not the emotional roller coaster, but your addiction to it. It's not him, but the part of you that chooses him again and again, hoping this time will be different. The day you can look at a dangerous man and feel compassion instead of excitement, the day you can recognize the pattern before falling into it, that day you'll have taken the first step toward your true liberation. And you'll discover that what you called boredom was actually the tranquility you so feared, and that what you confused with passion was nothing more than the activation of old wounds disguised as desire.